Hi everyone, and welcome to Hauntora. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This is the place where we explore the darkest, most deeply unsettling, true horror stories the internet has to offer. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Genuinely glad you're here. Before we get into tonight's stories, I just want to take a second to thank you all for the love and support on the channel lately. It really does mean everything. I also want to make sure nobody misses out on anything, so going forward, I'll always drop all important links right at the top of the description. Easy to find, always there. Now tonight we're going into two stories that I've had saved for a while. Stories I kept coming back to because something about them just refused to leave me alone. The second one especially. I'm not going to say much, but when I first came across it, I had to stop reading and just sit with it for a minute. That doesn't happen often. I think you'll understand why when you get there. As always, drop your thoughts in the comments when it's over. I read every single one. Now turn the lights down, get yourself comfortable, and let's begin. And please, viewer discretion is advised. I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I say that not to sound tough, but because it matters for what I'm about to tell you. I spent 11 years working night shifts at a logistics warehouse outside of Pittsburgh. I'm used to dark, used to quiet, used to being alone with my thoughts for hours at a stretch. My wife, Dana, always said I had the emotional range of a parking garage. She didn't mean it as an insult. It was just her way of saying I'm steady, I don't spiral, I don't catastrophize. When something feels wrong, my first instinct is always to find the boring explanation for it. That instinct almost got us both killed. We went up to the cabin the second week of October. It belonged to Dana's uncle, a retired electrician who used it maybe twice a year for deer season. He'd offered it to us before, and we'd never taken him up on it. But that fall, we needed the break. We'd had a hard year. Nothing dramatic, just the accumulated weight of two people grinding through their mid-30s. Long hours, some money stress, the kind of quiet distance that builds between a couple when neither of them has the energy to close it. The cabin was supposed to fix that, or at least interrupt it. The drive up took about 3 hours. The last 40 minutes was all two-lane road through state forest, the trees pressing in close on both sides, the sky going gray by the time we turned onto the gravel track that led to the property. The cabin itself was exactly what you'd expect. Single-story wood paneling inside and out, a stone fireplace, 2 small bedrooms, a porch that looked out over maybe half an acre of cleared land before the tree line started. No cell signal worth anything, satellite internet that worked when it felt like it. Dana loved it immediately. She stood on the porch in her jacket and just breathed. I watched her and thought, okay, this was the right call. We spent the first 2 days doing nothing in particular, cooked actual meals, took long walks along the gravel road, slept without alarms. By the third morning, I'd stopped thinking about work entirely, which was unusual for me. That afternoon, Dana wanted to walk into the woods behind the cabin just to explore. The trees back there were old-growth hardwood, mostly oak and maple. The canopy so thick, it filtered the light down to something amber and diffused. It was beautiful. We walked maybe a quarter mile in, following a deer trail that wound between the trunks. That's when Dana stopped. She grabbed my arm and pointed, and I looked, and about 60 yards off the trail, just visible through the undergrowth, there was a swing. A child's swing, the kind with 2 lengths of rope and a plank of wood for a seat, hanging from the branch of a large oak. It was facing away from us. The ropes were frayed at the top where they met the branch. I remember thinking it was strange because there was no house anywhere near there, no sign of a clearing or a structure, just the swing, hanging in the middle of the woods, perfectly still. Dana said it was probably left over from when someone used to own the land. Homesteaders, maybe. Or a family that logged the property years ago. She pulled out her phone and took a picture of it. I nodded and agreed with her because it was the obvious explanation, and we kept walking. I thought about it again that night. I couldn't tell you why. There was nothing objectively alarming about an old swing in the woods, but something about its placement bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. It was too centered, hung at exactly the right height. The wood of the seat looked clean. The next morning I mentioned it to Dana, and she said I was looking for reasons to stress. She wasn't wrong. I let it go. That night, around 2 in the morning, I woke up for no reason I could identify. The cabin was quiet. The fire had died down to coals. Dana was asleep beside me, breathing slow and steady. I lay there for a few minutes, trying to drift back off, and then I heard it. A sound from outside coming from the direction of the tree line. A low, repetitive creak, rhythmic, like rope pulling against wood under the weight of something moving, like a swing. I got up and went to the window. The porch light was off and the moon was mostly hidden behind cloud cover, but there was enough ambient light to make out the clearing behind the cabin. The tree line was maybe 50 yards from where I stood. I looked at it for a long time. I didn't see anything. The sound had stopped. I stood there another few minutes, then went back to bed and told myself it was probably a branch, or an animal, or the structure of the cabin settling in the cold. I believed it too, almost. The following afternoon, we drove into the nearest town to pick up groceries, and when we came back, there was a handprint on the outside of the cabin's rear window. Single hand, palm flat, fingers spread. It was at standing height, too large to be a child's. Dana thought it might have been there when we arrived, and we just hadn't noticed. I didn't argue, but I walked the perimeter of the cabin slowly, and I found boot prints in the soft soil near the back porch. Large, deep, evenly spaced. Someone had been standing there facing the cabin for long enough to leave a clear impression. I didn't tell Dana what I found. I told her I was going to take a walk, and instead I went to the tool shed at the side of the cabin. I found a hatchet hanging on the wall. I brought it inside and put it under the bed on my side. Dana saw me do it and didn't say anything. We locked every window that night, dead-bolted the front and back door. I sat in the chair nearest the front door with the hatchet across my knees and tried to stay awake. I made it until about 1. Then sleep took me. I woke up to Dana's hand on my shoulder, hard. Her nails were digging in. She was pointing at the front window. He was standing right outside it. White face paint, red mouth painted into a wide, fixed smile that ran past the corners of his lips, up toward his cheekbones. A dark costume, loose-fitting, with large buttons down the front. He was standing perfectly still, close enough to the glass that his breath was fogging it slightly, and he was looking directly at us, not moving, just looking. My mind went completely blank for a moment. Then it started working again. I stood up. I held the hatchet visible. I walked toward the window slowly, and I held eye contact with him. I said loudly through the glass that I was calling the police, and that if he was still there in 60 seconds, I was coming out. He tilted his head. I went to the back room and grabbed the satellite phone Dana's uncle kept for emergencies. It took 3 attempts to get a 911 dispatcher. I told them what was happening. They said they'd send someone, but the nearest patrol was 40 minutes out. When I came back to the front room, the window was empty. The back door handle moved. Once, just rattled slightly in its frame. Then nothing. We sat in the center of the main room, back to back, for the next 40 minutes. I held the hatchet. Dana held a cast iron pan from the kitchen. We didn't speak. We just listened to the cabin and the silence around it. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived at 3:22 in the morning. They did a sweep of the property and the surrounding tree line with flashlights. They found the swing, fresh scrape marks on the tree branch where the rope had recently been tied. Boot prints around the perimeter of the cabin matching what I'd seen earlier. Evidence of a campsite about 300 yards into the woods. A sleeping bag, a plastic bin of supplies, empty food packaging. Whoever had been living there had left in a hurry. They never found him. The case was filed as criminal trespassing. One of the deputies, an older guy, told me off the record that they'd had a similar report from a camping ground about 12 miles north earlier that summer. He didn't elaborate. I didn't push. Dana's uncle sold the cabin the following spring. He said he'd been thinking about it for a while. I didn't ask him if we were the reason. I've been back to the Pittsburgh warehouse, back to the night shifts, back to the dark and the quiet. I don't mind any of that. What I can't get used to is windows, specifically the moment, just before you look at one, when you still don't know yet what's on the other side. I've known Daniel Mercer for 23 years, and I still don't fully understand what he was capable of. I'm not someone who frightens easily. I spent 8 years working as a structural engineer, which basically means I spend my professional life looking for the things that are about to fail before they actually do. I'm trained to observe, to be skeptical, to not trust a thing until I've stress tested it from every angle. That background matters here because it means that when I tell you something was wrong, I'm not telling you that because I'm dramatic. I'm telling you because I ran every other possible explanation first, and this is the only one that held up. There were 6 of us. Me, my wife, Carla, our friends Jonas and Priya, and then Marcus and Michael. We'd all grown up in the same neighborhood in Western Tennessee, gone to the same schools. We were the kind of close that doesn't come from effort anymore. It just exists, like muscle memory. We'd done cabin trips before. This was supposed to be the 4th one, maybe the 5th. It blurs together after a while. The cabin was in the mountains, isolated enough to feel like a real escape, accessible enough that nobody had to 4-wheel drive to get there. Michael had found it, booked it, handled all the logistics. That was just Michael. He was organized in a way the rest of us had never been. He took pride in it. He liked being the person who made things happen. We arrived on a Friday afternoon in early October. The trees were starting to turn. The air had that particular cold, clean smell that mountains get in fall, something between pine and rain and dead leaves. The cabin was bigger than expected. Nice kitchen, a stone fireplace, a back porch that looked out into the tree line. Carla immediately claimed the porch for morning coffee. Priya started unpacking the food. Everything was easy, the way it is when you're around people you've known your whole life. We grilled that first night, drank too much, stayed up until almost 2 a.m, talking about things that didn't matter, which is the best kind of talking. I went to bed feeling the specific contentment of being somewhere quiet with people you trust. I don't take that feeling for granted. I didn't know that night that it was the last time I'd feel it for a long time. I woke up around 3 a.m, not for any particular reason. I just surfaced, the way you do sometimes in an unfamiliar bed. The cabin was dark and quiet. I got up to use the bathroom and happened to glance out the hallway window, which faced the back of the property. Michael was outside. He was standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 40 feet from the back porch, just standing there with his back to the cabin. Still. I watched him for a moment, waiting for him to move. He didn't. He was just there, in the dark, in the cold, in a thin, long-sleeve shirt. I told myself he'd had too much to drink and needed air. That was the rational explanation. I went back to bed and I didn't mention it in the morning. The second day was fine. We hiked a short trail in the afternoon, came back and played cards. Michael was himself, laughing, engaged, the same person he'd always been. I felt faintly embarrassed for having thought anything of the night before. But I woke up again at 2:30 the next morning, and he was out there again. Same spot, same posture. This time he was standing closer to the porch, maybe 20 feet out. I stood at the window for almost 5 minutes watching him. He didn't move. He didn't have a phone out, wasn't smoking, wasn't looking at anything that I could see. He was just standing at the edge of the dark. I went back to bed and lay there for a long time, not sleeping. I didn't say anything to Carla because I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything to the others because I didn't want to be the person who ruined a trip over something that probably had a completely normal explanation. People sleepwalk, people have anxiety, people need fresh air at odd hours. I cataloged every possibility and kept my mouth shut. By Saturday afternoon, Priya had a headache. She described it as pressure more than pain, like something squeezing from the inside. Jonas started feeling nauseous around dinner. He chalked it up to the altitude, which at that elevation was barely a factor, but none of us pushed back. I had a headache by 10 that night, a real one, deep behind my eyes. Carla barely touched her dinner and said she felt off in a way she couldn't describe. Vague, diffuse, like the start of a fever, but without the fever. Michael seemed fine. I noticed that. I noticed it to the way you notice a word that's spelled wrong. Something about it just sits wrong in the eye. 5 of us with headaches and nausea and fatigue, and Michael with his plate clean and his eyes clear and his posture easy. I told myself, some people just don't get hit by the same bug at the same time. I told myself a lot of things. I went to bed at 11 with my head pounding. Carla was already asleep. I woke up at 2 in the morning and I was sick in a way that scared me. Not stomach sick, wrong sick, a bone-deep heaviness, like my body was trying to conserve everything it had. My hands felt slightly numb. My vision was slightly off, not blurred, just somehow flattened, like depth had gone out of the room. I sat up in bed and it took longer than it should have. I walked to the hallway window. He was on the porch, not in the trees, on the porch, standing at the railing facing the back door, and in his hand was something small, a bottle. He was looking at it, then he looked toward the door. Then his head came up and he looked directly at the window I was standing at. I don't know if he could see me in the dark. I don't know what he would have done if he had. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My heart was going very fast and very loud, and the numbness in my hands had spread up to my wrists. I woke Carla. I woke Jonas and Priya. I did not go near Michael's room. I told them in a whisper that we were leaving. Right now. Tonight. I didn't explain why, not fully, and I just said I thought something was making us sick and we needed to go. Jonas looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Priya was too sick to argue. Carla has known me long enough to know when I've made a decision that isn't going to change. We were in the car in 11 minutes. Marcus was harder. He didn't want to leave. He kept saying we should talk to Michael, that this was insane, that I was being paranoid. I told him he could stay if he wanted. He got in the car. Michael's door was still closed when we left. I never knocked on it. We drove an hour and a half to the nearest hospital with an emergency room. I told the triage nurse that I thought we'd been exposed to something. The word I used was intentional, exposed. Not sick, not food poisoning. They took blood. They took it seriously. The results came back with elevated methemoglobin levels across all 5 of us. The ER doctor explained it the way doctors do, carefully with caveats. But the phrase she used was chemical exposure, consistent with nitrite poisoning. She asked us detailed questions about what we'd eaten and drunk. The investigation that followed lasted 4 months. I gave statements. Carla gave statements. The cabin was tested. Michael's belongings were searched pursuant to a warrant I was told about only afterward. What they found I won't detail here. What I will say is that the case did not go to trial. It was resolved in a way that involved Michael agreeing to certain things, and that resolution came with conditions that prevent me from saying more. I've been advised not to discuss specifics. I think you can read between those lines. What I haven't resolved, what I turn over when I can't sleep, is the question of why. We were his friends, his oldest friends. We'd known each other since we were 8 years old. There was no money involved, no obvious motive that anyone has been able to surface. The investigators had a theory, one they shared with me off the record, but it was just a theory. It didn't make it make sense. It still doesn't. I've run the stress tests on every explanation I can construct. None of them hold up. The last thing I know about Michael, and this is what stays with me, is that when the others and I drove away at 2 in the morning, he never came out of his room to ask where we were going. He already knew we were leaving.